So I'm incredibly humbled to be sitting up here with these two amazing people to talk about our journeys. And obviously, my sister Lauren has had a huge impact on where I have gone with my career and how I take care of patients. And it's something I have never shared before. For various reasons, and the way that we grew up, and so I'm excited to be here to share that experience with all of you and talk about some of the really amazing strengths that you'll see in these two amazing individuals here, the resilience, but also to have a very real conversation about what are some of the challenges that certainly I think we would all agree made us stronger people, but definitely were things that we faced in our life that we want to be real and honest about. So this is a safe space in here, and we really want to hear from siblings in the room as well as parents too about what your worries are and what your concerns are about raising either raising a sibling with raising someone with PWS. Can I understand how many people in here are siblings? Okay, perfect. So what I'd like to do is start and let Joe and Jordan talk a little bit about their siblings and who they are. So I'll start with Joe. Tell us a little bit about your sibling.
All right, nice to see everybody in here today. So as mentioned before, my younger brother Gavin has Prader-Willi. He was diagnosed just a couple days after birth, but he'll be 18 at the end of the year. So I'm not sure how that compares to everyone else in here today. But yeah, it's been a long ride so far, but love him. Love talking about him. Anyone who knows me knows Gavin. A lot of them just have met him through us, and all of our friends are his friends, and he's had a great impact on all of us. So last year I kind of got connected through Prader-Willi I ran the Boston Marathon for him. Big fundraiser. We ended up raising a ton of money for it, but the cool part was I think Gavin and I got a lot closer throughout it, and I think that on all the long training runs and everything else, it was a chance for me to almost think about all the physical adversity I was facing in the current moment and compare it to what they're going through on a daily basis. And it kind of, you never can fully put yourself in their shoes, but I think being able to do that, figuratively, like actually running, putting on the shoes and going, was an act to try to get there. And then along that journey, instead of just running the marathon, we were also, like I said, fundraising, which was great, met this whole community, got in touch with these guys, and haven't really stopped since there. Was at a conference in Dallas, and now was invited back today. Couldn't wait to come, share the story, but also learn from everyone else here, and just engage in that conversation and share, whether it's the hard topics that people don't really want to discuss or push down, or share the bright spots and hopefully inspire other people, whether it's United in Hope or just inspiring more change and positivity forward. So I'm excited for the rest of the conversation. Jordan?
Hi, my name's Jordan Rivard. My sibling is Jake Rivard. He is 13 now. We have the blessing of having our mom work for this organization, and so we've been able to really involve ourselves in the community, which has blessed my family beyond words. And so I hope that with you guys being here, you can also find your community. I know we had a lot of first-time families this year, which is extremely exciting. So I'm really glad to see some new and old faces. I'm also glad to see how many people are in this room. This is really exciting stuff, and we hope that we can reach a new audience with talking about our siblings. So Jake is going to be is 13 now. He just turned 13. And we live in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm now in Los Angeles, California, but back when I was in Nebraska, we did some similar fundraising activities there. If anyone has ever heard of the One Small Step Walk, we did the Nebraska chapter One Small Step fundraising, and that's actually how we met another family, the Colossics, who have a son with PWS, and it's really important to us to continue getting the state chapters together so that everyone has a chance to connect not only globally, but as well have some supports that are close to you. So I'm also excited for this talk because I am a sibling and I just want to connect with everyone. So thank you for being here.
Thank you both. So my sister is actually 30. Her name is Lauren, and she lives in Maryland with my dad. I actually live in Colorado with my family. I have 3 kids, and have a slightly different journey. Grew up in a family where my parents knew there was something different about my sister. I think we all did, and she's quite a bit younger than I am. And so my parents were very, very private people, and so they did not want anyone to know that there was something different about one of their children. And that's a very different environment to grow up in, and I think very different than experience of siblings who are younger than me, for sure. But that, really has shaped a lot of who I am and a lot of who she is. She's incredibly talented. She's a photographer. She went to art school. In my family, there was no other way but to be educated and successful, and she had to go to regular classes, and my parents did not want her to have an IEP. So a very different experience, I think, than some of the things we've been talking about at this conference. Does anybody want to share their experience? Yep.
Is Esther Levi in here? Esther Levi? Okay, sorry, carry on.
That's okay. Does anybody want to share their experience having a sibling with Prader-Willi with us? Introduce your sibling. Tell us a little bit about your sibling.
If not, that's okay. We can keep talking to help you guys
Yeah.
feel more comfortable.
Definitely, but we want this to be a conversation in the room and not necessarily us talking at you. So please don't hesitate to share or shout out with us. So I'll start with you, Jordan. Tell us a little bit about how your brother has shaped, how Jake has shaped what you do in your career so far.
Yes, I am sure that if nothing else, we can all agree that our loved one with PWS has an enormous impact on our life. And he has impacted my life, obviously, positively. He is my entire heart. I love him more than words can describe. And especially with our age difference, I'm 24 and he's 13. I refer to him very often as my baby. So he really is everything to me. When he was born, I always knew I had a passion for kids. I knew that I was going to work in a caring profession from a very young age. I figured maybe nursing, pediatric nursing, something along those lines. And when Jake was born, he didn't cry, he couldn't lift his head up, he couldn't breathe, he couldn't eat. And him being in the NICU and me visiting him and seeing him attached to all those tubes, and I probably will get emotional at some point today, just a heads up, but seeing him having that struggle just clicked something in me like a light switch that I need to give my everything to this child. And so now I am a master's level behavior therapist. So I work mainly with children who have an autism diagnosis. And I work with a lot of behavioral management, not only autism, but also I've had a few clients with Down syndrome or other disorders or diseases along those lines. I've never worked with the rare disease community outside of PWS in like my actual real world job, but I would really love to, and that's something that is my next course of action for my life. So now that I have my master's, I want to try to tie in ABA with the rare disease community. And I know Casey Bedard, I don't know if any of you have had a chance, she's speaking right now, which is ironic, but she is giving me a lot of important tips, and she is a pioneer in this field with ABA and Prader-Willi. So if you ever have the chance to meet her, I highly recommend that as well. And I'm really looking forward to, throughout this talk, being able to speak to some behavioral support techniques that I've learned, that I've used with my brother, and be able to kind of help families navigate that, because it is one of the hardest symptoms, in my opinion, of Prader-Willi syndrome. So.
And Joe, it sounds like you've done some amazing things like running the marathon, but tell us a little bit about how your brother has shaped who you are as a person today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Gavin has changed my life since the day he was introduced to our family. And from the start, grassroots level, and like everyone knows, changes different daily routines and stuff you might be doing, whether it's time of day you're eating or sticking to a structured schedule or little things like that. But I think one of the biggest things he taught me was he was able, and he has an incredible ability of making you realize the importance of the simple things and really taking back and understanding that, okay, we can get so caught up in all the big things in our daily life, yet every day, like he gets happy when comes home and the dogs greet him at the door, or comes home just to see everybody and hang out with people and do stuff like that. So like just being able to really take a step back and see, wow, how grateful he is for all the shortcomings he might have in every educational test and everything else. It's wow, he's still grateful and still happy at the end of the day. And it just makes you realize, why am I complaining? And it really just makes you kind of take a step back. And it's hard. It's not like doing that is an easy activity where you're sitting there and it's like, okay, well, I wish I whatever, you still have your same problems. Yeah, no one's taking those away. But I think it's just a way to kind of fight those issues. So he's done that for me. And then it's also, I think, from day one, you could tell he needed so much more care. He needed more attention and all that stuff. And I think what that introduced to me was more so, not like, hey, it's time to grow up, but hey, you have to take care of him. Like, he's dependent on you to succeed, and you, he needs you to do what he has to do in life. And I think it's a pretty cool gift to be able to help someone alongside that and see, okay, hey, this is what I've done, and now you can almost, for lack of a better term, impart your wisdom on him, which is pretty cool. And you almost have another partner through life as you keep going, which again, is how I look at it. So strictly he's just been a complete blessing, taught us tons, and yeah, I look forward to seeing what else he can teach us down the line.
I also wanted to add really quick, since we said we did want to not only share the positives, but the hard times too, I did want to add that Jake has taught me the most important life lesson of all, patience. He is definitely, it's hard to take him in public. It's hard to travel. It's hard living in the same house with him. He, as he's getting older, is getting bigger, stronger behaviors. And unfortunately, like I mentioned, I am in LA now, and I feel a big burden as a sibling leaving him just with my parents. My parents are both incredibly busy, and they are now left alone with a Prader-Willi child who is in the midst of engaging in bigger, harder behaviors. And so I know that they have the most patience in the world, and that's something that I've had to try to learn more and more as I go on, because it wasn't always like that at the beginning. I remember a specific story actually was, I wanted a cat forever. I absolutely love cats. I begged my parents for pets all the time. Jake gets old enough to ask for a dog. He gets one. They say, "Do you want a second?" I said, "You have to be kidding me." And so I've had to have patience in the fact that he gets more than I do, and that's the way of the world. It's okay. It's not the end of my world. I'll be all right without a cat. I'm now old enough that I can buy myself a cat if need be. So patience is something I wanted to share.
And I think you brought up a really important point, which is the guilt of being a sibling. And I'm going to try not to cry, but I brought plenty of tissues. Being one of the things that's the most challenging as an adult, having a sibling with Prader-Willi is, being able to do so many things that my sister would love to do. Like, she would love to have kids, and I have 3 kids. And, you almost feel horrible that you have that independence and opportunity to be able to have your own family and have your own independent life. That is something that has really impacted my sisters and my relationship, especially after we lost our mom. It's very, very challenging because there's a sense in individuals with PWS of fairness in the world, and you learn that life is not fair. We all learn that lesson, but I have a really rocky relationship with my sister because some of her cognitive rigidity, especially since my mom died, has been around the lack of fairness that I can have a separate life, that I can have a family. She absolutely loves my kids. She's the best aunt that you'll ever meet in the world. But that is something that as a sibling is just really hard. Anybody else in the audience want to share who's a little bit Yes, please.
If you need a microphone, we can pass one, but
Yeah,
you want to?
no, I am a parent of two daughters. One is 20 and she has Prader-Willi, and she has a daughter 5 years younger. So when the youngest, that is a neurotypical girl, was 5 years old, she asked me who would take care of my sister when you are no longer around. And I didn't have a good answer, so I gave like 3 or 4 answers, and none of them were very convincing. And when this youngest daughter was 8 years old, she developed a very severe psychiatric disorder, anorexia. I guess most of you are familiar with that. And she was just stopped eating for 1 week, for 2 weeks, because of all the food environment at home. And then we couldn't do anything about that, except trying to force her to eat, to the point that she was then hospitalized. The doctors called us to a room and said, "You guys be ready because you are going to go through a very tough cycle from here." And then she was hospitalized and fed by a tube for 7 weeks until she was starting to react with a psychiatric treatment. And today she is 15. She overcame the anorexia, but it is still kind of a cloud in our lives that we don't know what kind of psychiatric reaction she might still have in her life. So I appreciate and respect a lot your ability to overcome the challenges that you have been through. I have a huge appreciation because I can imagine how hard it is. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
I was a little late coming in. Are you guys all older than your Prader-Willi sibling? Okay.
Yes.
One of the questions I have, and we have a blended household. So I had a couple of kids in the previous marriage that were like 10 years older than our son. But our son is the oldest of my wife and I's kids. So the oldest two had a really tough time, but they were only there half the time. So when they came to our house, food was restricted, but when they were at mom's, everything was fine. So they were pretty well adjusted because they had their week of I can eat whatever I want. I know when I go to my dad's, I can't. My other two, my daughter and my youngest son, my daughter's 2 years younger than him, and my youngest son is 4 years younger. They have never known anything but everything's locked. We have locks. We have everything. So now my daughter is 13, and she has friends that get to do whatever they want and do all those things. My question to you is, how did your parents and how did you deal with, okay, I have a brother or a sister that has Prader-Willi, because I know it's hard for me to, sorry.
Don't be.
Don't be, yeah.
It's hard for me to work with my daughter with that. So I'd like to know how your family or how you guys dealt with some of those issues. Because it's a struggle right now. We have a tough time with my 13-year-old. I mean, I'm sorry, but a 13-year-old girl. I mean, I was a teacher. A 13-year-old girl is tough enough as it is. But to put this on top of that, I mean, we have struggles sometimes because she gets super upset with him and with us because she can't live that normal life at our house. So what I'd like to know is, like, what are some things that your parents did or what you guys did to get over that? Because I know you've had to have those thoughts and those issues before. And that's what I really appreciate, is because I do have two right now that are struggling. And I know they're good with, and they love him, but there are times where they feel like, and they say things that are really damaging to us. I don't think it affects him as much, but it is to us because we hear the things they're saying about him. And I'd just like to know what you guys, how you got over that, because I know it had to be tough, especially if you were older and you came into, okay, now everything's locked, or if you were younger and that's what you knew. And then when you see friends and all that, if there's anything that you guys could share with that, would be awesome.
I think one thing that's incredibly important is having some time with your other kids where you take them to a diner and so that they can order what they want and you don't have to worry about it. Have that special time with your kids that without your child with Prader-Willi there. That I think is incredibly powerful. I think the other thing that I didn't have, but that I would strongly encourage parents to do, is talk with your kids about it. Have a conversation with your kids and acknowledge that it's hard. And that it's hard for everyone. It's hard for siblings. It's hard for parents too. And acknowledge that those challenges are there. The relationship with food of siblings is something that I think is really, really important, because when I was growing up, I didn't want to eat in front of my sibling. And I am going to be honest and say I had very disordered eating, and it was more not eating and then going out with friends or waiting till my sibling went to bed and then eating too much because you're like, what if they wake up? I gotta eat before they wake up. And so I had very, very abnormal eating, when I went to college. I just think you creating that relationship with the siblings of talking with them and doing things with them and having opportunities for them to feel independent is just so incredibly important.
Yeah, fantastic question, by the way. I think it's one of those things that we all look at and everyone faces, and it's something that is just an underlying worry I think most parents have and kids have as well. I thought mine was kind of similar to what Jessica was hinting at, but more so I thought my parents did a good job of, we had conversations more so about it. So everyone was aware and everyone knew, but you still almost more so felt like you had a guilt. And I feel like, at least for me, it was more so like I felt bad that he couldn't eat this stuff and he couldn't be full. But I knew too, like my parents, we would talk through and say, well, yeah, I knew if I went to one of my friends' houses, we could have food out and we could eat whenever, or we could go to a cousin's house and it was totally the same. It was totally normal. But if we go to family gatherings, we have to go around certain times. We have to eat at a certain time and leave before dessert. or something else because he's going to want to have one of everything. And I think it's hardest at that age when you can't rationalize it right away, where especially, I mean, it's a very unique perspective having the child with Prader-Willi as the first, right, or as the oldest, and then the other two are coming up. Almost, we were talking about it earlier today, but they're coming up, looking up to the older sibling, but then they also almost have to parent the older sibling as well. So it's a very interesting and tough situation to be in. The biggest thing I'd probably say is, again, like, it's encouraging to have those conversations, but then like Jessica was saying, also having a dose of normalcy so the kid knows, all right, it's not just that, like, I can't have food around mom and dad. Like, maybe mom and dad take out whatever the sibling is, and then you three or you four do something that day, or you guys have food at the house and it feels somewhat normal, or one of the parents does that, just to increase some sort of normalcy in the situation, even though, like we've established this whole time, none of us have normal families. We're all normal for our community, but none of us are really normal. We say it all the time. But I think that the best thing you can do there is get it out in the open so it's a talking point, so everyone understands it. And then how you cope with and deal with that understanding, I think, varies circumstance by circumstance.
Just quickly, before we address your question or comment, I would say from my personal experience, as I mentioned, I am older than my brother. So I was old enough when we received his diagnosis to comprehend what was going on. I understood what was being explained to me about Prader-Willi. And not very often will I say I got mad at Jake. I really never, I definitely have a unique relationship with him in the fact that we're so close. But I was mad at Jake about having to not eat when I wanted to eat and completely changing my pattern of living that I'd had for 11 years. And my parents were really stressed and overwhelmed, and it did lead to tension in our family because all of us had different opinions on how we needed to handle things with Jake, and how we each had our own perspectives about how we felt about things. And at first, it absolutely felt like I was put on the back burner. The neurotypically developing child, the older child, I had to just get on board with it because this is how it was going to be. And it took me a little bit to get over that initial shock. And something that I think parents can try to do for their sibling, the sibling of the PWS child or adult, whoever it is, is that for me it was extremely important. I needed myself to bring that conversation up, so it's important that you as parents can make them feel comfortable enough to bring those conversations to you. Be like, I understand that you could potentially feel this way, and you can talk to me about it because I don't think anything changed until I was proactive and brought up to my parents how angry I was and how upset I was. And then they, thankfully, were amazing parents and found a way to keep me in mind more than they had been. So
The one other thing I just want to add is that there are, especially for younger kids, one of the ways in which this has shaped my life is to try to develop a toolbox for bringing up these discussions with families. And so we have created an online platform called Rare Sibling Stories, which has allowed for, it's on Instagram and Facebook, so social media platform. We have some children's books for younger kids to help families bring up these conversations and start the conversation with their kids. I've done quite a bit of sibling research, and one of the things that we've learned is that parents don't bring these conversations up or open the door to have these conversations enough. And so we're trying to create some resources both for siblings to support each other and bring stuff up on a platform in a safe space online, but then also to have resources for families to start the conversations.
And we do have that on a slide that will be presented at the end of our session if you want to take photos. And we have a lot of our resources posted up on the slide at the end.
Oh, sorry.
So, in my family, my son is 4 and he's the youngest, and I have twin daughters. And I find it so hard to parent like equally. Like something's in the house, a toy, whether it's his or not. But if somebody's fighting, he always gets it. And I say, yeah, but he's the youngest, or I don't even have any excuses anymore. I mean, there's always an excuse, and he always gets it. Or if something comes home and it's even a pink hoodie, then I ended up thinking that I gotta buy things in threes because I have triplets. Or the grandmother sends 2 of something and he doesn't get it. So this is something I'm struggling with, and then I try to troubleshoot, and then I'm like, okay, I need to have 2 separate tools for parenting. One for these 2 and then one for him. But we all live in the same house, so that doesn't work, and we're always interacting in the same living spaces. So I don't, and I worry, and my twins have said it, that you only love Marcos. And they even drew something, that psychological drawing, that he was the center of everything and he was the only happy one in the family because he always gets what he wants. And this just behavior, I'm not even talking about food. And apart of the mom guilt we already have, I'm so scared of my twins, and I'm living with they resent me because they feel that their needs aren't important anymore since diagnosis day, which was like 2 years ago. And my question is, like, what can I do about it? To go home tonight and try to like fix it, or have a strategy, or maybe like a special time, like you said, or like what can I do to help that, or to, I don't know, just anything. Prevent it from happening.
Yeah, of course. I would just like to say right off the bat that I've expressed that to my parents before as well. And I would love to say that, they're for sure going to grow out of it. That may just be what they're saying now, and they'll 100% get over it, but then they might. I got over my feelings of resentment as I've gotten older and more understanding, but I think that at the very beginning, when I did feel that resentment for my parents, to be honest, there probably wasn't much that they could have done to change my mind. I just was so set in my ways that he was the only loved one. I said that up until probably a few years ago. I mean, to be completely honest. But I was lucky that I had other family members also that were able to give me some extra attention sometimes. I don't know if that would be the case for your family, but really calling on maybe some other family, friends, to really give them that special attention, lift them up, and not to exclude yourself by any means, but just show them that, like, hey, look, all these people who still love and support you, including myself, and we want the best for you guys. And you said, because it was twins, right? Twin daughter, yeah. So just other than doing something special for them every now and again, if you can, everyone would love that. But kind of starting to let them have a support network, which, again, we will have our resources if they want to join any of our sibling accounts. So
I would add too that some of this is mom guilt, and I can speak about that for years to come. And I have the unique situation where I also have a son with special needs. So I will say the mom guilt is there and present. But I have to say, kids are resilient, and I don't think we give them enough credit for that. And, I think, look at these 2 people right here who are telling you they've been through the same thing, and look at how it's shaped what amazing people they are. And I think my experience talking with siblings is that there's also the aspect of this where, you know, right now they carry some resentment, and I can't emphasize enough talking about it and having an open conversation with them about it. But I also think it shapes the hearts that we all have and the people that we become. And it certainly has shaped the doctor that I am. I mean, anybody that sees me knows I'm the most accessible person of anyone in the world. You can get to me in many different ways, and that's largely because I grew up feeling like my parents were in crisis all the time and wondering how can I take that experience, which has both positive and negatively shaped who I am, mostly positively, and make myself someone who can help other people in the same situation based on my journey. And it's my whole passion for what I do. And so I also want to remind everyone how resilient kids are and how much we carry and how much we perceive certain things as a mom, that actually when we have those conversations, we find out that, you know, it's more what we carry and the thoughts that we have and not necessarily how our kids feel. Sorry, did you want? Sorry.
Hello, good afternoon. I have a 12-year-old daughter who has PWS, and then I have a 7-year-old daughter who is traditional. My question to you is, did you ever, and so I guess it's a different phenomenon from the three of you, who are the older kids, but I think the question goes to this expectation or feeling of responsibility that you have to take care of your sibling. Is that something that your parents talked about, didn't talk about it? Because I feel like my second daughter is not responsible for taking care of her older sister, right? I want her to live her own life, make her own choices, be happy, right? Is that something that you naturally felt, didn't feel? Did you want your parents to not feed it into you? You're not your brother's or your sister's keeper. You're going to lead your own life. And did you make that choice, or what would you advise me? Because I want her to love her sister, but I don't want her to feel that responsibility that she was born to take care of her sister.
So glad you asked that. I was going to give the same answer as I was going to give a minute ago, so I can segue in. I feel like my situation, like how me and my brother Davin's relationship really took off, kind of started in this kind of path, where growing up, I can remember everyone was kind of like a pitched in effort. We were all doing stuff, but the difference between him and I is about 6-7 years. So for the first little part, like I was so caught up in my day-to-day, worried about like, hey, what time I'm gonna get off the bus from school, what activities I'm doing, stuff like that. That I don't really remember as much from like 7 to 11 and things in that area. What I do remember as changing is when I hit the middle school age and high school age, it was Gavin and I, it wasn't that we were necessarily butting heads, but that's when I could really start to see, okay, there was the attention shift, and there was the attention of Gavin would receive more attention for obvious reasons. And what my dad did that I thought, looking at in the current moment, didn't understand, but what now look back on and I'm really grateful for, is one of the biggest things I was doing was I was spending time with him every day. So then it almost shifted where I was spending a ton of time with him, and he'd always tell me, go spend time with Gavin, and I would always be spending time with him after school, whatever I was doing. And over time, it just so happened that became normal, and then that's almost where I think that paternal aspect came in. Now, and that also, like downsides, that like, definitely makes it harder to go and do your own stuff, or do your own things when you feel like you're supposed to be taking care of him, or you feel like you're supposed to do this, but then that's where I think it comes back to the cliche again, it takes a village, where it takes everybody. Gratefully, like in my family, there's 4 others, so it's me and 4 brothers. So there's 3 other people that can always jump in there, and then 2 parents and everyone else. So there was always someone else that could also step up and do things there, which helped. So I'm not gonna like pretend like that was always easy. But I think one of the biggest things he did was by spending more time with him, it was almost like you're confronted with the issue. And then it was alone time, it was just me and him. And sure, sometimes is he gonna get under your skin, ask you a million questions, perseverate on certain things, and leave you banging your head against the wall? Of course. But there was also other times where you have like the best memories and best moments, which make up half my camera roll, and you go from there. So I think that like the power of time there can develop, obviously, that relationship and then go from there.
I would just encourage you not to make any decisions about that. I think, again, it comes back to having those conversations and not pushing it one way or the other. Different solutions and future planning works differently for different families. For my family, we used to live in Maryland, and when I had my son, my sister would triggers my son, and my husband and I had to make the decision that we were not going to take my sister in. We were going to support, we were going to do everything we could, but it was not in the best interest of our kids. Even though when we got married, I made sure my husband knew it was not just me. Our life changed, and it just isn't what's best for our kids. And so sure, I have a lot of guilt about that, but there's different directions, and I still love and support my sister, but there's no way that she could live in our household because I have to support my son. So that conversation is different for different families, and I think just it's important just to have that open door and that open conversation.
I actually have something really quick piggybacking off of that for you, is that mine came instinctually. I started being a natural caregiver for my brother, and I felt great about that. I actually was the first person he ever took a bottle from. And so yeah, it really came instinctually. And then as I got a little bit older and those feelings of anger and other negative emotions set in, it flipped back. And my parents, I am the only, so it's just us two. And so my parents would ask me to stay with him. And now that he's 13, I go home to visit often, and well, as often as I can. And they'll ask me to stay with him because they want to do whatever they want to do, right? And I get angry because I'm like, oh, he's 13. He could have stayed home by himself if he didn't have Prader-Willi. And so sometimes being the caregiver does stink a little bit, but because it does interfere with my life. And he has asked me for I don't know how many years now, Jojo, can I live with you when I grow up? And so that's been something that I am going to have to navigate as the time gets closer, and that my parents have started to have those conversations with me as we all get older. So it really is a time-by-time basis. So I see a few hands up. You want to just...
Over here, then we'll go out.
Our daughter's 13 years old. Sorry, 12.
It happens.
And her brother is 2 years older, and just talking about the parenting side of things, my question was there a time when you guys had a conversation with your parents about something that you thought would work for your sibling, that whether it was an outburst or something like that, and how did you maybe have that conversation?
I will jump right into that one because that is literally my whole career, and I have no shyness about inserting my opinions on Jake's behavior to my parents. Even if it wasn't my career, I think that part of my instinctualness to help care for Jake would go along with that. I think that feeling like I care for him, I actually felt entitled to make decisions for him sometimes, which my parents didn't love that, but I think it's very instinctual to want to give advice when you see someone struggling. So I don't know if that has been the case for you guys or if not, but yeah, that's what I have experienced.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things we did, it was kind of like whenever there's like a blow up or anything else happens, it's almost like a divide and conquer, if you will, and you realize like, all right, hey, someone was the instigator, somebody started this thing, you get them away, and then maybe someone else goes in. But the difference part is like, I know we're taught this is some like big mission, but the cool part about it was like everyone almost has a different tactic and a different way of reaching him. So obviously the mom's gonna have a different way of reaching than the dad. And I mean, clearly we all know it's a dynamic disorder. There's not gonna be just one cut and dry, you have to apply this and this will calm that person down. So I think the best way is remaining open, right? And being nimble like we've kind of talked about throughout this whole time. It's a dynamic disorder. We have to also be dynamic in the way we care for it and apply for different things. So I think being open, having conversations, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. Maybe certain things are setting them off. Maybe certain things help calm them down. So I think that's kind of like what's worked for us the most.
And I just think it's incredibly important to have those times where you give special attention to siblings and have those conversations. And what I think will happen is that they'll start to come up naturally as the siblings get older. And, actually, in my experience working with siblings is lots of siblings, just like Jordan, have a very specific viewpoint of what they want for their sibling and whether they want to take that caretaker role. So I've seen that evolve naturally and that conversation evolve naturally. And I think what you want to avoid is statements or times where you make an opinion known of what you hope for that and get in the way of their own thought process of how they view that, because that actually causes resentment. It causes them to feel like they're forced into a situation as opposed to a solution they come up with themselves. That makes sense.
I think maybe we just keep our hands up and then we can start keeping track because we lose track of who has questions.
This gentleman.
Yeah. Right here, right here.
Yeah, right here.
All right, Daryl.
Well, all I can say is I admire all of you people for coming here. And if you'll stick with it, it all pays off. And you are going to be a better person by involving yourself in what you're doing here, you siblings and your parents. For many years after I graduated, I helped put together the Mesa Association for Retarded Citizens in Mesa, dealing with special needs kids. And over the years, I've seen families and I've seen siblings and I've seen people progress just like you kids here. You're better off by having this opportunity. I know it's tough and you have outbursts, but if you'll stick with it and pray about it, you're going to be better off as a person by what you do here. Because it's an opportunity, I think, that we have to not have perfect kids all the time. I just want you to stick with it and know that I have a son here. He's 35 years old. And when he was born, he was just, they called him a FLK, a family-looking kid. And wasn't going to be able to walk or do anything. And since then, he's progressed. He's an Eagle Scout. He's gone to college a little bit. He's been a horse rider. I could just tell you more about Justin, but he's a great kid. But I just want you to know how I've progressed as the dad, and his siblings have all pitched in. But you're going to be, each of you, a better person by keeping your head up and putting through this because of the product that's going to end up not only for the child, but for yourself.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Hey there, I just want to say I think this is a really, really relevant conversation, and I'm really grateful that it's being recognized as something to be brought out in the open. My oldest son is 30 and his sibling is 27, and my oldest son has kind of more the severe behavioral end of things. And I was a single parent, so we were in crisis a lot, and my focus was on my oldest son a lot, and we are very open in conversations about everything in our home, but I don't think I had enough of those conversations, honestly. So I like hearing what you're saying to the younger families. I think it's really important to have those conversations and maybe allow that space for the younger child to step out of that environment and get an opportunity to be away from it. My youngest son had really very severe migraine headaches, which would cause him to have to leave school multiple times a month, and very severe stomach issues, which we had testing done for years. And when Logan went into a group home environment, it all stopped. And my youngest has just only, and he's 27 now, just only recently in the last few years started talking about his anger. And I would almost call it rage, to be honest. And we've talked about it a lot in the last few years, and it's like, and I'm really happy to see it. And I know we had this opportunity in the last conference too, and I was so glad. I was like, wow, that's something that needs to be talked about. Now, I will say I agree with this gentleman here in a huge way, and I see it in each of you. My youngest son is an incredibly compassionate human being. He has sensitivity at a level that is unusual, and he has lived his life in a very forward way and done things. He's a Navy diver. He's done things that he's pushed himself because he says he saw what his brother struggled so much to do. And he's talked like you about becoming a pediatric nurse when he gets out of the military. So I just want to commend each of you because we all have choices in this life, and the struggles, as we saw on one of the quotes earlier at lunch, can also be huge opportunities. And so I think it's important to remember, and for the younger families too, who talked about the struggles with their children, there's always a yin and a yang to everything, right? So the hardships, we can turn them around and we can utilize them to help somebody else. And I see the passion in each of you, and I thank you for taking the time and being willing to be open. It's hard to be so transparent. And with people, although we're your family, you don't really necessarily know us. So I think it's great, and I appreciate the opportunity and encourage everybody to keep going on.
Thank you.
Thank you. All the way in the back against the wall. Do you want to try to yell? It's not that big of a room.
So I'll keep this really brief. My name's Beth Farmer. I'm also a sibling. I'm 30 and my sister Katie is 27. And the one thing I just wanted to mention that hadn't come up yet was practicing and speaking with your children about how to have conversations with their peers about what's going on at home. Like others, adolescence was really a hard time in our house. We're only 2.5 years apart. But I came to rely on a friend group that I went to kindergarten through high school with and I'm still really close with. And I'm so grateful that my parents had those conversations with me, but then helped me develop language to share what was going on at home in a way that was accessible, that allowed me to have a really authentic group of friends that then can carry you through the chapters when things are more challenging. So that was my last thing.
That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Where am I going?
There's a lot of hands in
yes.
5 minutes. We're going to go. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
So to comment on that from my perspective and my experience, we do have an 11-year age gap. So a lot of my friends were around my brother even for just a few years. And still to this day, I get texts or questions about how's Jake doing? And he's a very popular young man if you haven't met him. He makes the world his best friend in an instant. And I did have some people in my life that did eventually leave my life. For example, I was in a relationship, and the guy that I was in a relationship with, I asked him to talk on the phone with my brother for a little bit while I ran and did something else, and he was like, well, what do you want me to say? And so I have had some relationships in my life fizzle out or die in regards to my brother, because not everyone's going to understand it. Not only is it special needs, it's Prader-Willi syndrome, you know? It's very hard for people to understand living like that and how that could affect them. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who are too worried about the effects on themselves. And then you get to know that, and then you choose the people you want in your life. So that was a great point.
I think that's incredibly important point. And I would say, again, talking with your kids, and we'll talk about some resources, have children's books, for example, to share with your class, or we've had siblings make presentations to share with their class, which has been a very nice tool for people to also, almost like therapeutic, to make that presentation and talk about what it's like. And I think also giving siblings an outlet that's their own, so a sport that's their own, where they have, potentially friends that they would make or a team that they would join. So give outlets for activities and things that would allow for those relationships to form, and for them to develop, an independence in their friend relationships. What Jordan brought up is incredibly important too, because, as we think about the journey and, getting married, and I'm a lot older than these two, it was always a package deal. It's from the moment my sister was born, it wasn't just marrying me. It was marrying my family and accepting my sister and whatever responsibilities came with it. And, that's incredibly difficult in a stressful environment to build a relationship. But I think I also married a really good person.
I mean, I think they pretty much covered everything that I could have said there, so not really going to elaborate too much more. I know we're getting close to the time there, so I know we might have a couple more questions. What we were going to do is we left the contact information up here. We meet pretty regularly, like we'll just have Zoom calls and things like that. What we've talked about before in terms of like next steps, things you guys would like to see in the future, if it's helpful, you guys can ask these questions. We can answer them, whether it's either you guys come on a Zoom call, we have more discussions like these, or sit down with siblings. We'd love to grow a bigger sibling outreach and support and really kind of spread the word that way, but also increase these conversations. Keep it coming up, make it more normal, and help it. I think that it pays dividends in the long run. I think really what it does is it validates people for feeling a certain way and understanding that A, they're not alone, it's not totally normal, but also what they're dealing with, maybe someone else has, and they can offer some sort of tip or advice. So I don't know if you guys want to speak on that quick, but.
I would just say my last closing statement in regards to contact information would be, we also said at the beginning of this chat, we want a safe space to share the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And so as we are trying to create more sibling support, whether it's in these groups or in the Zoom meetings, we do want to have a platform where siblings feel that they can be supported how they need to be supported. And so we are in the midst of trying to find a better way to keep us all in contact. And those updates will be published on the Facebook group. So if you don't have Facebook, I know my number's up there, Jessica's email, Joe's number. Feel free to reach out to us individually. And that is all. Thank you for coming.